Hey guys, tonight we drift into a sunrise, so gentle it almost brushes your cheeks as you step toward the ancient Nubian court at Napata. The air is cool, touched with the faint sweetness of river reeds and the soft hum of voices that have been chanting since long before you arrived. Even the great bend of the Nile seems to move more slowly here, as if it, too, respects the calm rituals of kings. You breathe in the pale morning light, calm, golden, suspiciously peaceful, and already you can feel your shoulders loosening. Careful, though. You're wandering into the ceremonial heart of a royal kingdom, and you probably won't survive this unless you walk like you've been practicing serene dignity your entire life. No pressure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from in the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The court is waking when you step inside, not with the clang of metal or the stomping of guards, but with an almost suspicious gentleness, ushers brushing sand from pathways, priestly acolytes adjusting reed mats, old men sweeping in quiet, looping motions that make your eyelids droop just watching them. Everything here looks like someone pressed the calm mode button centuries before anyone invented an actual button. Your sandals crunch lightly against pale sand as you move closer to the riverbank. The palace is perched just above the Nile's shimmering surface. Low sandstone walls, open-air colonnades, and wide courtyards designed not for showy intimidation, but for catching wind that feels like cool silk when it brushes your skin. Oh, and mosquitoes, yes. Ancient royalty dealt with those too. At least, dragon-sized Nubian ones don't seem to be out this early. Small blessings. Priests in white linen pass by, each carrying small bowls of burning incense. The smoke drifts upward in slow ribbons, curling into shapes that look suspiciously like doodles the breeze might be making for fun. A mainstream historical fact hums in your memory. The royal court at Napata really did conduct many dawn rituals outside, embracing the rising sun as a sign of cosmic favor. The kings of Kush believed their authority was refreshed each morning by the very act of witnessing dawn, which is honestly kind of poetic and also a great excuse for never sleeping in. Further ahead, a cluster of musicians plays soft notes on lyres and curved trumpets. The melody is barely louder than your breathing, as if the music is shy about interrupting the sunrise. One musician yawns midway through a note, covering it so gracefully you almost applaud. The sleepy professionalism is real. As you follow the sound, you notice something peculiar. Everyone walks as though they're gliding, not stepping. Even the guards. Even the goats wandering too close to the ceremonial mats. It's like the entire court trained at a secret Nubian ballet school. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some early travelers really did claim that Nubian palace attendants moved with unearthly softness, which historians suspect was either exaggerated or the result of those travelers needing glasses. Near the river, a young priest motions for you to kneel beside a low basin. He scoops cool Nile water into his palms and sprinkles it lightly onto your forehead. The droplets trail down your skin, cold and refreshing. He nods approvingly, as though you passed a test you didn't know you were taking. Purification, he murmurs. Even observers must carry quiet hearts. You nod back with your best "I'm absolutely calm and not internally screaming" expression. A large stone platform rises along the riverside, carved with symbols of Amun, the great god who anchors much of Nubia's royal identity. The king isn't here yet, but attendants are preparing the space, laying polished stones, arranging lotus petals, smoothing cloths with motions so delicate that watching them might lower your heart rate. The Nile glitters brighter as the sun climbs. Birds skim across the surface with the confidence of creatures too small to care about royal ceremonies. You hear the distant rumble of hippos, which is your gentle reminder that the river can and will eat you if you wander too close. Nature keeps everyone humble. As you stand, taking in the scene, a group of elders settles nearby, kneeling on reed mats. Their hands rest calmly on their thighs, faces tilted toward the horizon. The oldest of them murmurs a line that barely reaches your ears. A king who cannot greet the dawn cannot greet his people. Historians still argue whether this phrase was literal tradition or a poetic invention. Later scribes added because it sounded cool. Either way, it carries weight in the morning air. The first rays of full sunlight spill across the court. A hush falls, not dramatic, not forced, just the natural kind of silence that slowly wraps around everyone like a warm cloth. You feel it settle into your shoulders, your breath slowing without your permission. At the far edge of the courtyard, a procession approaches slow as drifting reeds, quiet as a cat sneaking past a sleeping lion. You feel anticipation gather around you, soft but electric. The king is coming, and in this gentle dawn, surrounded by calm rituals older than empires, you feel yourself pulled deeper into a world where serenity isn't a luxury, it's power. You keep your gaze steady as the procession nears, the early light drifting over gold, linen, and polished stone like the world is deliberately dimming the brightness to keep your eyelids half closed in a sleepy haze. The musicians pause mid-melody gracefully, of course, none of them dropping an instrument or sneezing loudly, and the entire courtyard exhales into silence. Even the Nile seems to soften its ripples, as if trying not to make a scene. At the center of the slow-moving line stands the king, or rather, glides the king. He moves with such deliberate calm that you wonder if he's walking or just being gently pushed by a team of invisible spirits. 2 attendants flank him, each holding a fan of ostrich feathers that swish in soft, measured arcs. It's less royal intimidation posture and more ancient Nubian spa commercial. The king steps onto the prepared platform, his sandals barely whispering against the stone. His body is wrapped in fine white linen, but not layered heavily, just enough fabric to make him look regal, without smothering him in this desert heat. His crown isn't the towering, dramatic sort you'd expect from Egypt next door. Nubian kings preferred something subtler, a leather or cloth circlet, adorned with small feathers, gemstones, and symbols of divine favor. A mainstream historical fact settles into your mind. Nubian coronation rituals were intentionally calm, focused on harmony, unity, and the god Amun's gentle guidance, rather than dramatic displays of domination. Egypt may have left its mark on Kushite aesthetics, but Nubia carved its own rhythm of kingship, one based on serenity, not spectacle. A priest approaches the king, holding a small bowl carved from alabaster. Inside is fine red sand from the nearby desert. You watch as the priest pours a delicate stream of sand into the king's open palm. The king raises his hand and lets the sand slide down in a slow ribbon, letting the grains fall through his fingers as though releasing time itself. You swear your mind slows down with every grain. Honestly, if this ritual were performed in modern times, TikTok wellness influencers would lose their minds. The priest murmurs something soft in Meroitic words you don't quite catch but feel somehow. You sense it has to do with grounding, with acknowledging the earth beneath power. The king must know stillness. An elder whispers beside you. How can he steady a kingdom if he cannot steady sand? You make a mental note. Ancient Nubian advice great for ruling kingdoms and surviving stressful grocery store lines. The ceremony continues, with a circle of priests stepping forward in near-perfect synchronization, slow, soft, entrancing. Their movements form a subtle spiral around the king, as though they're shaping the air around him. Each priest carries a small object, a lotus blossom, a carved lion pendant, a miniature ram figurine, a polished stone shaped like the crescent moon. Items representing strength, clarity, protection, and divine connection. One priest hands the king a staff, another ties a narrow cloth sash around his upper arm, a third, moving with the exaggerated caution of someone who really doesn't want to mess this up, sets a feathered crown gently atop his head. The king bows his head slightly, acknowledging the weight, not physical weight, mind you. The crown looks extremely comfortable of what he's taking on. Then comes the strangest, most mesmerizing part. 2 attendants bring forward a shallow bronze basin filled with Nile water. The king kneels and touches the water's surface with just the tips of his fingers. No splashing, no dramatic submersion. He simply lets the water tremble beneath his touch until the ripples settle into stillness again. A quirky tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some early travelers wrote that Nubian coronations required the king to match the stillness of the river before being declared fit to rule. One described trying and failing miserably to touch the river without causing ripples, then blamed crocodiles for distracting him. Historians are about 70% sure he was lying, and 30% sure he was just bad at rivers. You watch the king's reflection settle on the water's surface, sharp, steady, unbroken. The crowd murmurs in approval. A ripple of energy, not loud, not dramatic, just a warm hum moves through the gathered priests and attendants. But the ritual isn't over yet. A deep horn sounds from somewhere beyond the courtyard, its note rich and low, like the earth itself has decided to join in. A procession of dancers enters, slow dancers, mind you, no jumps, no spins, just gentle swaying movements that mimic the river's currents. Their robes drift softly around their ankles, stirring the air with scents of blue lotus. You find yourself unconsciously swaying with them, because apparently ancient coronation choreography is hypnotic enough to override your free will. The final moment arrives with a subtlety that surprises you. The high priest steps forward, lays a hand lightly on the king's shoulder, and announces in a voice barely louder than a whisper. Amun sees stillness in him. That's it. No trumpets blaring, no fireworks, no lions roaring dramatically in the background. The entire coronation hinges on stillness, on the king's ability to be calm enough, steady enough, grounded enough to guide his people. And yet, you feel the power shift. The energy around the king deepens, like a quiet drumbeat felt rather than heard. The attendants bow, the priests lower their heads, and even the goats wandering past the courtyard pause, which honestly might be the truest miracle here. Historians still argue whether Nubian coronations were this meditative in practice, but inscriptions and reliefs strongly hint that tranquility was a sacred expectation. Anger had no place in these rituals, neither did haste. The king rises slowly, the feathered crown catching sunlight. He moves with the same serene authority you've seen since he first stepped onto the platform, but now you understand it. He isn't just performing calm, he embodies it. And as the ceremony winds down, the Nile shimmering behind him, you realize something unexpected. You feel calmer too. Like the coronation rubbed a little stillness into your soul while you weren't looking. You take a quiet breath, sand under your sandals, sunlight warm on your skin, and prepare to follow the king deeper into a world where serenity rules as firmly as power. You follow the newly crowned king as he steps down from the platform, moving with that unnervingly serene glide that makes you suspect he has tiny wheels hidden under his sandals. The crowd around you slowly begins to stir again. Attendants rolling up ceremonial mats, priests collecting incense bowls, musicians quietly debating whether they should resume playing or take a desperately needed hydration break. The lyre player looks like he's been awake since the invention of bronze. The king walks toward a shaded colonnade near the edge of the courtyard, and you trail behind him, trying not to crunch too loudly on the sand. The moment he disappears beneath the shade, a pair of attendants gently close the carved wooden screens behind him. But before you wonder whether you've just been excluded from the fun part of Nubian kingship, a soft voice beside you says, "You're with me. This way." You turn to see a young priest, barefoot, calm eyes, absolutely giving ancient Nubian yoga instructor, energy beckoning you toward another entrance. You follow, stepping into a cool, dim chamber that smells faintly of incense and animal fur. A low rumbling sound confirms your suspicion before you even see them. Lions, several of them, just lounging around like house cats who happen to be the size of furniture. And they all look oddly relaxed, which is not a word you typically pair with apex predators. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Nubian kings, particularly during the Napatan and Meroitic periods, were frequently depicted alongside lions. The animals symbolized royal strength, divine favor, and protective power. While they weren't domesticated in a modern sense, lions were kept in controlled environments and trained to behave calmly during rituals. One lion lifts its massive head and looks straight at you. You freeze. It blinks once, yawns wide enough to remind you how small and chewable you are, then flops its head back down onto its paws with the enthusiasm of a creature who has given up on mornings altogether. The priest smiles faintly. "They will not harm you," he says, which is exactly what someone trying to reassure you right before lion harm happens would say. But you try to trust him. He guides you deeper into the chamber, where shafts of light fall across carved reliefs, showing ancient kings standing beside lions, not dominating them, but simply sharing space, calmly. As equals in a symbolic relationship only ancient royalty would have the confidence to attempt. The priest gestures toward a young lion reclining on a raised stone platform. This one, he says softly, will accompany the king during the afternoon rites. You squint. The lion isn't pacing, roaring, or even mildly interested. It looks like it's considering a cozy nap, or several cozy naps. Maybe a light snack first, but definitely naps. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some ancient writers claimed Nubian lions were naturally gentler than their desert cousins, an observation modern zoologists politely disagree with. It's more likely the Nubians were just very, very good at conditioning calm behavior into their royal animals, or they gave them a lot of meat, or both. The priest leads you toward a gated courtyard attached to the chamber, where more lions rest among palm trees. Some snooze in the shade. One lazily swats at a hanging reed. Another rolls onto its back, with the carefree confidence of a creature that knows no one will judge its belly-up position. You wonder, the priest says, watching your face, how they are so calm. You nod vigorously. It is the ritual, he continues, and the rhythm. The lions learn early that the king's presence means stillness, not frenzy. We raise them with patterns, not punishments. He gestures toward a group of attendants sitting nearby, humming a low, repetitive tune that blends with the rustling palms. They live surrounded by this. You listen more closely. The hum isn't aimless. It's structured low tones rising and falling like a heartbeat. You realize it has the same cadence as the chants from the dawn coronation. Lions and kings, both kept steady by the same song. One of the animals stands and pads toward the fence, its paws surprisingly quiet on the packed earth. You jump slightly, but the lion merely leans into the fence, brushing its head against the wooden slats like a giant version of a cat requesting a head scratch. You resist the urge to oblige. You'd like to keep all your fingers. The priest crouches down and touches the lion's mane through the slats. "This is Marju," he murmurs. "He has been with us since he was a cub. He knows the king's scent. He knows the rituals. He knows the calm." The lion Marju nudges the priest's hand with a deep, rumbling purr that vibrates through the floor. You stare. The lion purrs. This enormous carnivore is contentedly purring like a cat that just discovered a warm spot on a blanket. Even your anxieties begin to purr a little. "Today," the priest says, "Marju will walk beside the king as a symbol of power in harmony, not fear, not domination. Harmony." You let that word settle into your chest. Harmony. It fits this place, the soft dawn ceremonies, the delicate sand rituals, the measured coronation, and now the tranquil lions who seem borderline meditative. Historians still argue whether Nubian kings truly walked with lions during rituals, or whether art exaggerated this relationship. Some believe the animals were more symbolic, kept nearby, but not directly involved. Others argue the depictions show a real tradition, one built on careful training and generations of conditioning. But watching Marju gently headbutt the priest's hand, you believe it. The priest gestures for you to follow him through a second doorway leading into a preparation room. Here, artisans lay out wide leather collars, embossed with gold studs, ceremonial ropes woven with beads, and feathered ornaments meant to be tied around the lions' necks. Not restrictive, just decorative, like a lion-sized friendship bracelet. One artisan lifts a collar and beckons you closer. "Feel it," she says. "It's surprisingly light, crafted to avoid irritating the animal. A lion must feel free to be calm," she adds with a knowing smile. "Humans too, perhaps." You help adjust the beads on one collar. Honestly, the fact that you are bead-stringing accessories for a royal lion might be the peak of your resume. As the artisans finish their preparations, the chamber grows peaceful again. Lions breathe softly. Priests hum. Light drifts lazily across the floor. You step back and let the serenity wash over you, and for a moment, you understand why the Nubian kings surrounded themselves with these powerful creatures, not to intimidate, but to reflect a truth. Authority rooted in calm is stronger than authority rooted in fear. You take a slow breath, sand warm beneath your feet, ready to follow the king and his tranquil, surprisingly affectionate lions into the next ritual waiting beyond these shaded walls. You step out from the cool lion chamber into a long, sunlit walkway that leads toward one of the palace's quiet inner gardens. The air is warm now, brushed with the scent of acacia resin, and something that reminds you faintly of warm clay after rain. The attendants glide along beside the king, carrying scrolls, incense cups, and what appears to be a basket full of ceremonial fruit not for eating, of course, because this is royalty, and nothing is ever eaten at a normal time. The king walks ahead with the same unshakable serenity, and you follow at a respectful distance, trying not to trip on the polished stone tiles. The lions remain behind for now, but you can practically feel their calm lingering around you like invisible furry guardians. The walkway opens into the garden, a rectangular space framed by low walls, shaded by tall date palms, whose fronds sway slowly, as if moved by a breeze that only exists inside ritual spaces. Sunlight filters through the leaves in soft golden stripes, the kind of lighting that makes you wonder if ancient Nubian royalty hired their own personal sun crew. At the center of the garden stands a wide, shallow pool, lined with smooth stone, filled with water so still it mirrors the sky without a single ripple. Even your breathing feels like it might disturb the surface. A group of priests in linen robes approach with deliberate, gentle steps. One raises his hand in greeting, then motions for you and everyone else to sit on the low benches surrounding the pool. As you settle, you notice carvings along the pool's edge, depicting animals, constellations, and flowing patterns that resemble the movement of water. They shimmer faintly in the light, as if the stone itself remembers ancient ceremonies whispered into it thousands of times. A mainstream historical fact rises in your thoughts. Nubian kings frequently performed purification rites involving water, oils, and incense. Unlike many neighboring cultures where purification was dramatic and intense, Nubian practices leaned toward quiet reflection, letting the king center himself spiritually before making decisions or performing state duties. The goal wasn't to wash away sin, but to harmonize the mind. The king kneels at the edge of the pool. An attendant unwraps a small clay vessel and places it beside him. Another sprinkles crushed lotus petals across the water, their soft purple glints drifting across the surface. Then a priest brings forth a bowl filled with aromatic oil, golden, thick, shining like a miniature sun. He pours just a small amount into the pool. Instead of spreading chaotically, the oil blooms across the water in delicate, circular ripples, forming rings that move outward with mesmerizing slowness. You feel your heartbeat sync with those rings, or maybe the rings sync with you. Either way, it's soothing enough to put your anxiety into temporary hibernation. You watch as the king dips both hands lightly into the water, then brings them to his face. He breathes in deeply, the scent of lotus and oil carrying into the air. There's a softness in the moment that makes even the birds perched in the surrounding palms quiet their songs. One priest begins speaking, not chanting, not singing, just speaking in a tone so even and calm that you instantly want him to narrate a sleep meditation app. Water remembers, he says. The river remembers storms, but it also remembers calm. Let the king remember both and choose the calmer path. A quirky tidbit flickers into memory. Some Nubian records hint that priests believed water could store emotions, not in a scientific sense. Obviously, historians still debate how literal these beliefs were, but in a symbolic, spiritual way. Water carried the memory of the land. By touching it, the king touched the past and anchored himself to it. Two attendants approach with braided cords made of reeds and dyed threads. The cords are beautifully crafted, each segment colored differently, reds for strength, blues for clarity, greens for renewal. They place the cords into the king's open hands. He lifts them into the air slowly, letting them catch the sunlight. They cast tiny streaks of color across the water's calm surface. The priests begin to walk in a circle around the pool. Slow steps, soft feet, a rhythm so steady you feel your eyelids droop. It isn't hypnotic in a spooky way, just deeply peaceful. The kind of movement humans instinctively match because it feels like exhaling after a long day. The king stands now, cords in hand, He dips them into the water, letting the colors darken as they absorb moisture. When he pulls them out, they glisten like newly polished gemstones. He ties them loosely around his wrists, a symbolic reminder that even kings are bound to their responsibilities, their people, and the rhythms of nature. Historians still argue whether these cords had legal significance or were purely spiritual symbols. Some believe they held magical properties, while others insist they were no more than sacred reminders. Watching the ceremony now, you suspect the truth is somewhere in between. The cords don't radiate magic, but the moment they touch the king's skin, the entire courtyard seems to soften, as if acknowledging a subtle shift in the air. Once the cords are tied, a final ritual object is brought forth, a small carved stone shaped like a reclining cow. The priest sets it beside the king on the pool's edge. You've seen lions, rams, falcons, even crocodiles, used as symbols in art. But cows? The priest sees your confusion and smiles. She is Hathor, he explains. She gives calm joy. Ah, a royal emotional support cow. Honestly, not the weirdest religious object you've ever encountered today. He explains further. Hathor's cow imagery wasn't exclusive to Egypt. Nubia embraced it in its own soft, subtle way, blending local symbols with adopted ones. The king touches the stone cow with 2 fingers, then rests his hand briefly on his heart. The gesture is small, but the meaning is clear. Joy is a duty too. You let out a soft breath, realizing how different this ritual feels compared to coronation rites elsewhere in the ancient world. No roaring crowds, no dramatic swords or fire, just sunlight, water, lotus petals, oil, and a symbolic cow offering emotional stability. The king's shoulders seem to relax. The priests stop walking and bow their heads. The water rings fade into stillness, and you realize you've been holding tension in your own body. Now it melts away like desert heat at dusk. The king steps back from the pool, calm, radiating from him like a warm, steady glow. The purification rite is complete, its effect clear not only on the king, but on everyone present. Even the butterflies drifting near the lotus petals seem unusually chill. As attendants help gather the ceremonial tools, the king turns toward the next courtyard. His steps are light, his posture softens, and you feel something subtle shift within yourself too, like the water's calmness quietly seeped into your thoughts. You rise from the bench, stretch your arms gently, and follow him into the next moment of this strangely peaceful journey through ancient Nubian kingship. You trail behind the king as he moves out of the purification garden, his footsteps whispering across the sandstone tiles with a calm so effortless it almost feels rehearsed. But it isn't. You've been watching him long enough now to realize this is simply how Nubian kings were during rituals, quiet, steady, and somehow radiating an aura that makes your lungs remember how to breathe at a normal speed. The path ahead leads through a series of narrow colonnades, each casting alternating stripes of sunlight and shadow across your skin. The temperature shifts with each step, warm, cool, warm again like the palace itself is exhaling around you. A faint breeze flows through the corridor, carrying the scent of incense and something deeper, the earthy smell of clay, fresh clay, shaped recently, still drying. You soon see why. The procession enters a long hall, where rows of artisans sit on woven mats, each working with clay tablets, pigments, and carving tools. Quiet hums of concentration fill the space. It's not silence, not exactly, but the type of focused hush you hear in a library, a monastery, or a classroom right before a pop quiz. The king steps forward, and the artisans bow their heads just enough to show respect without breaking focus. They're in the middle of preparing royal seals, offering plates, and small ritual figurines. Today's ceremony, you quickly realize, involves the king choosing which designs will be blessed for the coming year. And that's why you're here to witness the softest design review in history. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Nubian kings oversaw artistic workshops, ensuring that symbols used in state rituals were accurate, harmonious, and aligned with sacred tradition. These workshops were hubs of religious and political expression, producing everything from temple reliefs to personal amulets. One artisan, A woman with clay-stained hands and a calm, patient smile gestures for you to approach. On her mat lies a freshly carved tablet showing a lion seated beside a tree, its mane rendered in delicate spirals. The lion is unmistakably Maju, the royal lion you met earlier. Apparently, he's famous. This design invokes harmony and protection, she explains softly. The tree represents the kingdom's growth, the lion, its steady heart. She hands you the tablet with surprising trust. It's warm from the sun and smooth except for the carved lines. You run your fingers across them, marveling at how deeply the grooves sit enough to last centuries, assuming nobody drops it. You resist the urge to check whether ancient artisans carried insurance. Nearby, another artisan shapes clay into small figurines of the king's symbols that will be placed in shrines across the kingdom. You watch him pinch tiny folds into the robe, trailing his fingertip in slow arcs to define serene facial features. This one is for the north, he murmurs, where the wind is loud. It reminds them that the king is steady, even when the world is not. You nod, impressed by the poetic practicality, art as a form of therapy. Honestly, the modern world could use more of that. Then you notice a table where pigments sit in small ceramic cups, reds, blues, greens, and a particularly bright yellow that looks like it could glow in the dark. A young scribe mixes a pinch of powdered stone with water using a reed brush, creating a smooth paint that would look extremely good on your bedroom wall. Too bad ancient pigments are not for home decor testing. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some ancient Nubian pigment recipes included crushed eggshells for brightness and a plant resin that supposedly kept colors vibrant in desert sun. There's even a fringe belief, likely exaggerated, that certain workshops guarded their dye formulas so fiercely that the recipes were whispered only once a year during a ritual, then immediately burned afterward. You sincerely hope this isn't true, because that sounds like a project manager's nightmare. The king kneels beside a collection of finished pieces. He studies each with quiet attention. No dramatic pointing, no speeches, no, let's circle back to this later, corporate energy, just slow breathing and thoughtful inspection. When he finds a piece, he favors a clay seal, showing a crescent moon. Embraced by a pair of wings, he lightly touches the design with his thumb. Instantly, the artisans smile. That tiny gesture is the royal approval stamp. No clipboard required. A priest steps forward with a small vessel containing powdered incense. He sprinkles a few grains over the seal. The powder releases a thin ribbon of fragrant smoke, rising in soft grey spirals. The symbolism is clear. The king's approval joins the divine breath. Historians still argue whether this ritual had political meaning or was simply spiritual. Some believe approved symbols communicated the king's priorities: strength, harmony, protection, while others argue it was more about maintaining cosmic balance. Watching the artisans' reverent reactions, you suspect it was both. A kingdom speaks through symbols. After all, you linger near a group of young apprentices who are shaping small clay bowls. One of them looks up, eyes wide with excitement. "This is my first year helping," he whispers. "If the king picks one of my pieces, my mother will brag until next winter." You grin. Pride transcends time and geography. He shows you his bowl, simple but beautiful, with 4 small dots around the rim representing the 4 directions. It's not perfect, but it's earnest. And honestly, you'd pick it. Then something charmingly odd happens. A tiny bird, a sparrow, flutters into the hall, lands directly on one of the clay pieces, and hops around like it's auditioning to be part of the ritual. The artisans freeze. The sparrow chirps, pecks at a bit of clay, then flutters away again. Everyone exhales at once. The apprentice leans toward you and whispers, "That is a blessing, or a sign of chaos." Historians still argue whether birds mean good luck or disaster. You stifle a laugh. Of course, scholars can't agree on sparrow symbolism. The king presses forward, choosing a handful of designs to be carried into the next part of the ritual. The rest will dry, fire, and eventually be placed in temples or distributed to local shrines. Your gaze falls on the apprentice's bowl. The king's hand hovers over it, pauses, then rests gently on its rim. The boy's eyes widen into small suns. The king moves on as if nothing monumental just happened, but the workshop glows with quiet joy. Attendants gather the chosen objects into a woven basket lined with linen. Each piece rests carefully inside symbols of the kingdom's intentions for the coming year. The artisans bow deeply as the king exits the hall. You rise and follow, feeling the calm creativity of the space stay with you, like clay dust on your fingertips. Another ritual awaits, shaped by the king's serene choices. But for now, you savor the hush of the workshop, the smell of warm clay, and the echoing truth that even kings shape the future through quiet hands. You step out of the artisan hall and into a broad courtyard, where sunlight spills across pale stone in soft, warm sheets. The air here feels different, lighter, touched with the faint scent of burned herbs. A dozen braziers stand arranged in a circle, each one glowing with gentle flames that flicker lazily, as if they've been instructed not to startle anyone. This, you sense, is where the king's next ritual unfolds. Invocation by incense. Priests in linen robes stand spaced evenly around the circle, each holding a carved wooden box. Their expressions are serene, almost meditative. You can tell they've been doing this for years because not one of them seems concerned that their robes might brush a live flame. Meanwhile, you're calculating your personal fire radius, like someone who deeply respects burnt eyebrows. The king steps into the center of the circle, hands resting gently at his sides, the reed cords on his wrists glinting faintly. His entire posture radiates what can only be described as ancient monarch who could out-relax a sleeping cat. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Incense rituals were a central part of Nubian kingship. Though influenced by Egyptian practices, Kushite ceremonies emphasized calm invocation rather than dramatic summoning. Smoke wasn't meant to rise in wild, towering plumes. It was meant to drift, slowly, carrying the king's intentions into the spiritual realm like a soft letter delivered by air. One priest steps forward, opens his wooden box, and reveals dark pellets of resin raw frankincense, golden and gleaming like tiny suns. He sprinkles a few grains into the nearest brazier. A soft spiral of smoke rises thin, pale, barely moving. Another priest adds powdered myrrh. The smoke thickens slightly, carrying a deeper scent, warm and earthy, with the faint sweetness of sap. Then a third priest steps up, and here's where the ritual gets deliciously odd. His box contains what looks like crushed petals, dark pink, speckled with gold dust. He scatters them into a brazier, and suddenly the smoke turns a shimmering rose-gold hue. A quirky tidbit floats into your memory. Nubian incense makers were known for experimenting with additives, flower petals, crushed gemstones, even powdered desert salts, to create symbolic scents for specific rituals. Some mixtures were believed to soothe the gods. Others were said to help the king see more clearly. One ancient writer even claimed that a certain incense blend made people more honest, though historians suspect he just inhaled something weird. The king inhales slowly as the smoke wafts around him. He lifts his hands, palms open, and the smoke curls between his fingers like it's been trained to perform for him. Priests begin humming, not singing humming, deep, low, rhythmic vibrations that roll through the courtyard like distant thunder softened for bedtime. The sound vibrates in your chest, grounding you. You feel your shoulders drop a little, your breath slows. You swear even the flames settle lower, as if participating. The humming grows into a layered pattern, each priest weaving into the next, until the air feels like it's wrapped in a gentle blanket of sound. The king moves through the smoke with careful steps, slow, deliberate, practically floating. His hands rise, fall, trace patterns you don't recognize but instinctively feel are meaningful. Each movement calls a virtue, whispers an attendant beside you. Calm, strength, joy, wisdom, mercy. You quietly hope the king is calling patience too, because you just watched a nearby goat stare down a guard with questionable intentions. Then comes the most startlingly peaceful moment so far. The priests open their boxes one more time, this time revealing tiny carved beads. They toss them into the flames, and as the beads scorch, they release little puffs of color: soft blue, pale gold, muted green, warm amber. Each puff rises like a miniature cloud before dissolving into the air. Historians still argue whether these beads held symbolic meaning or were simply aromatic tools. Some claim each color represented a spiritual principle. Others suggest the beads were early air fresheners for ceremonies. Watching the king slowly raise his arms as the colored puffs dissolve around him, you suspect both could be true. Rituals often do double duty. The king kneels. A hush falls over the courtyard, so complete you can hear the faint pop of a resin pellet catching flame. The humming stops. The smoke shifts direction, curling gently toward him like a living presence. A single priest steps forward, older, voice steady as a slow river. "May your breath join the breath of the land," he murmurs. "May your calm join the calm of the ancestors. May your strength remain gentle, and your gentleness remain strong." You feel something inside your chest loosen, like a knot untangling. Then the priest turns to the brazier and adds one final ingredient, a pinch of glowing sand, taken from a jar etched with lunar symbols. The sand doesn't behave like normal sand, it sizzles softly, releasing a thin veil of pale blue smoke that rises directly upward, perfectly straight, without drifting. "This," the attendant whispers, "is the sign the gods are listening." You lean in a tiny bit, because honestly, you've never seen sand behave like it's auditioning for the role of world's most obedient smoke trail. The king rises, slow and steady. The cords on his wrists sway slightly, catching the light in shimmering arcs. The smoke parts before him as he walks, curling aside like it recognizes a friend. Priests tap their staffs softly on the ground once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoes gently through the courtyard. The ritual is complete, and yet, you don't move. Not right away. You're too wrapped in the lingering scent of ancient resins and crushed petals, too held by the calm of it all. Even your heartbeat feels slower, like the smoke carried away your inner chaos along with the king's intentions. Finally, you step aside as the attendants gather the braziers and carry them toward the temple's inner chambers. The smoke thins, drifting lazily upward, as if reluctant to leave. The king turns toward a shaded archway. You follow. Another ritual waits one quieter, deeper, shaped not by scent or movement, but by memory itself. And you realize you're ready for it. Not because you understand everything, but because the incense taught you how to breathe again. The king walks beneath the shaded archway, and you follow into a long, narrow passage lined with tall stone walls. The temperature drops instantly, the way it does when you walk into an air-conditioned grocery store after baking in the parking lot. You inhale, surprised by the sudden coolness, and catch the faint scent of old parchment and polished wood, an aroma that has ancient library written all over it. The passage opens into a large, domed chamber, where light filters through narrow slits high above, falling in thin beams across dozens, no, hundreds, of carved wooden tablets. They hang from the walls like oversized charms, each one etched with scenes of past kings, hunting lions, raising temples, forging alliances, consulting oracles, drinking from ceremonial cups with the kind of posture that says, "Yes, I am absolutely aware I'm being recorded for future generations." This is the Hall of Memory. A mainstream historical fact clicks into place. Nubian kings participated in rituals that invoked the deeds of ancestors. These ceremonies were not about grandeur, but about reflection, quietly acknowledging the legacies they inherited, the weights they carried, and the responsibilities they accepted. The past wasn't a museum piece, it was a companion. You step carefully across the mosaic floor, which forms a swirling pattern of blues, reds, and ochres, like a stylized Nile winding its way through time. The king stands at the center of the chamber, sunlight falling across his shoulders, illuminating the cords on his wrists and turning their damp threads into softly glowing lines. Priests enter silently, each carrying a slender wooden staff carved with spirals. One of them taps his staff on the ground tok, and every sound in the room folds inward like a held breath. He speaks, "Let the past attend the present." His voice is low, steady, and echoing gently through the chamber despite its softness. Another priest begins walking along the walls, touching certain carved tablets with the tip of his staff. With each touch, the tablet emits a faint hum, soft as a distant bee, barely audible, but deeply felt. The priest gestures for you to approach one of the tablets he's awakened. You step closer and see a relief depicting a king sitting beside a great river, a lion curled at his feet. The carving is delicate, stylized, yet expressive. The lion's tail loops around the king's leg like a loyal companion. This king, the priest whispers, brought peace to the northern border. He listened more than he commanded. He taught that quiet strength bends disputes like reeds in wind. You run your fingers over the carved lines, noticing how smooth they are from centuries of touch. The air feels heavier here, but in a comforting way, like stepping into a room filled with soft blankets and steady heartbeats. A quirky tidbit rises in your memory. Some ancient scholars wrote that these tablets were alive because priests believed the deeds of past kings resonated spiritually through the wood. One storyteller even claimed the carvings whispered advice at night. Modern historians politely raise an eyebrow at this idea, but then admit that the acoustics in these chambers are weirdly good. The king moves from tablet to tablet, pausing at each one, lowering his head slightly as if greeting an old friend. His expression remains serene, but you notice something new, a subtle gravity, the weight of legacy settling onto his shoulders. Another priest lifts a small bronze bowl filled with smooth river stones. He offers it first to the king. The king reaches in, takes one stone, holds it for a moment, then sets it gently on a pedestal beneath a particular tablet depicting a queen strong-jawed, regal, holding a staff shaped like a lotus bloom. That was Queen Amanirena's, whispers an attendant beside you. She defended the kingdom with fierce strategy and calm resolve. You nod, impressed. The king's gesture wasn't random, it was respect, a conversation with the past. Now the priest approaches you with the bowl. Oh, you weren't expecting that. He tilts the bowl slightly, inviting you to choose a stone. You look at the king. He doesn't speak but gives a small, almost imperceptible nod and encouragement. So you reach into the bowl, feeling the smooth, cool stones shift beneath your fingertips. You select one oval, warm from the priest's hand, comforting in its weight. The priest inclines his head and gestures toward any tablet that calls to you. You walk slowly, letting your instincts guide you until you stop at a carving showing a king standing in a quiet courtyard, arms lifted as incense smoke curls around him, calm, centered, entirely composed. Something about it resonates, maybe because you just watched a modern version of that ritual unfold. You place the stone on the pedestal beneath the tablet. It clicks softly into place, like it always belonged there. The priest murmurs. So the memory grows. You feel a small warmth bloom in your chest. The ritual continues. Priests recite short phrases, not praise, not flattery, but reminders. Patience guides power. Kindness fortifies rule. Memory steadies the uncertain. Stillness reveals truth. Each line settles into your mind like feathers drifting into place. Historians still argue whether these rituals influenced political decisions or were purely symbolic. Some suggest kings genuinely sought guidance from past rulers. Others insist these ceremonies were a public demonstration of humility. Watching the king, now his quiet reverence, his unhurried movements, you sense these rituals did shape him, not because he believed the tablets literally spoke, but because reflection shaped wisdom. As the final tablet hums and the last stone is placed, the priests return to the center of the chamber. They lift their staffs and tap them once against the floor. The hums fade. The silence deepens. The king closes his eyes, breath steady. When he opens them again, you see something new, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Clarity. He bows his head to the priests. They bow lower in return. The ritual of memory is complete. You turn to leave, but just before stepping through the archway, you glance back at the tablets. The sunlight shifts, brushing across carved faces and ancient lions. For a moment, it looks as though the past itself is watching you with gentle curiosity. You step into the next corridor with a steadying breath, carrying that quiet gaze with you like a soft hand resting between your shoulder blades. Another part of the king's serene journey awaits. And now you understand that the calm isn't just ritual, it's inheritance. You leave the Hall of Memory and follow the king into an open-air passageway. where sunlight pours down in warm, golden sheets. The world feels brighter now, not dazzling, just gently illuminated, as if the ancestors themselves approved the king's steady composure and decided to adjust the palace lighting accordingly. Ahead, a cluster of priests and attendants gather around a set of tall wooden frames, draped with fabric dyed in rich reds, deep ochres, and soft blues. The fabrics sway in the breeze, forming a shifting curtain that obscures the ritual space beyond. You can hear soft voices behind the drapes, low, rhythmic, carrying the particular tone of people reciting something half-remembered and ancient. As you step closer, an attendant slips past you, murmuring, "The god Amun awaits." You swallow. No pressure. The fabric curtains part, revealing a sacred courtyard reserved for invoking divine guidance. It's quiet, not in a heavy, ominous way, but in the same soft hush you find in an early morning museum exhibit, where everyone instinctively speaks at 30% volume. At the far end of the courtyard stands a tall, slender shrine carved from dark stone. Its surface is etched with looping patterns that look like swirling winds and rising suns motifs, associated with Amun, revered in Nubia as a powerful god of creation, kingship, and invisible strength. A pair of ram statues flank the shrine, their curved horns polished until they gleam like copper in the sunlight. The king steps forward, and the priests fall into a semicircle behind him. You take your place at the edge, feeling oddly welcomed, like a calm spectator in a very old theatre performance. A mainstream historical fact forms quietly in your thoughts. In Nubia, Amun held immense authority, arguably even more emphasized than in Egypt at times. Kings sought his blessing not through thunderous declarations but through calm introspection, soft recitations, and ritual offerings designed to harmonize rather than command. One priest approaches the king, holding a bundle of reeds tied with red thread. He places the reeds in the king's hands, and the king lifts them slightly, acknowledging, accepting, promising. The air shifts, not dramatically, no sudden gusts or mysterious glowing lights, just a subtle, grounding stillness, like the silence you feel right before snowfall. Priests begin reciting invocations in low, layered tones. Their voices weave together in a way that feels less like chanting and more like humming thoughts into the air. The king raises the bundle of reeds and moves them slowly, tracing gentle arcs first above his head, then before his chest, then toward the shrine. An attendant whispers to you, "The reeds represent breath, strength that cannot be seen." You nod, impressed. In a world obsessed with big gestures, this ritual is practically sponsored by the concept of subtlety. A small bronze bowl is brought forward, filled with water taken from the Nile at dawn. The king dips the tips of the reeds into the bowl, and when he lifts them, droplets fall onto the shrine's base, each drop shimmering briefly before sliding across the stone. The priests murmur, "Let water remember its maker, let breath return to its source, let the king walk with the unseen strength." And then comes the wonderfully odd part. A priest appears carrying a small, carved wooden ram, wearing what can only be described as a tiny ceremonial harness. He sets the ram figure on a pedestal beside the shrine, facing the king. Its expression is surprisingly endearing, like a sheep convinced it's running for class president. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. Some ancient Nubian communities believe that Amun occasionally manifested as a ram, only when he felt particularly fond of the king's behavior. As in, if the king was calm, honorable, and wise, Amun would soften his face, symbolized by a gentle ram figurine rather than a fiercer image. Scholars debate whether this was theological doctrine or just a charming story told by priests who liked their gods approachable. The king kneels before the shrine. A priest brings forward a small clay cup filled with powdered gold. Yes, actual gold, because apparently subtlety does not preclude luxury. The king takes a pinch between his fingers and sprinkles it at the shrine's base. The powder glitters, catches sunlight, and drifts downward like soft sparks. You hear one priest whisper, "Gold is the breath of the earth." Another replies, "And calm is the breath of the king." The king closes his eyes. Silence settles so gently you almost don't notice it at first. The reeds in his hands remain perfectly still, not a tremor, not a twitch, as though the entire courtyard is holding its breath with him. Historians still argue whether kings actually meditated in these rituals, or whether stillness was merely a formal posture. But watching him now, it's undeniable. He's not performing calm. He's practicing it. You feel the air change again, the kind of shift you notice inside your own chest, more than in the world around you. A soft thrum, a groundedness, a quiet invitation to breathe deeper. When the king opens his eyes, they carry a stillness so deep it feels like looking into a quiet pool of water. He touches the reeds to his forehead, then lowers them to the ground in a gesture of humility. The priests echo the gesture. The invocation is complete. But the ritual isn't over. Two attendants step forward carrying a long cloth embroidered with swirling gold lines. They drape it over the king's shoulders not as a symbol of dominance, but as a soft acknowledgement. He carries strength, but gently. He bears authority, but quietly. As the king rises and turns, the fabric flows behind him like a slow-moving river. A gentle breeze drifts across the courtyard, lifting the edges of the cloth. You can't help but smile. Nature, it seems, appreciates good choreography. The king begins walking toward the courtyard's exit. Priests follow, attendants follow, and you, oddly lighter in spirit, fall in line as well. As you step through the fabric curtains again, sunlight warms your face. The god has been invoked. The king has been steadied, and you feel steadied too, just by being here. Another ritual waits deeper in the palace, one less divine, more human, but equally gentle. You follow the king through another shaded walkway, where tall columns cast long, striped shadows across the stone floor. The air grows warmer again, touched with the faint scent of roasting grain and something sweet like honey left in the sun. You soon realize why. You're approaching the feasting court. Now, to be clear, this is not a feast in the sense of loud music, chaotic platters, and people trying to, accidentally, sit closer to the king. Nubian royal feasts, at least the ceremonial ones, are calm, quiet, and astonishingly polite. You could bring a very nervous cat here, and it would probably do fine. The courtyard opens into a wide space, with low tables arranged in neat arcs. Each table holds small trays of offerings: dates, figs, roasted sorghum cakes, bowls of thick milk, and slices of honey-dipped melon. Nothing is piled high. Nothing is extravagant. Everything is arranged in modest, balanced portions that whisper instead of shout. This is a ritual, not a buffet. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Ceremonial feasts in Nubia often emphasized moderation and harmony. While everyday celebrations could be lively, sacred royal meals were designed to reflect the king's balance, neither indulgent nor austere. The king ate enough to show gratitude, but never so much as to seem greedy. It was a political message delivered through portion control. Soft music begins a low, rhythmic plucking of a lyre. The musician sits cross-legged beside a palm tree, eyes half closed in concentration. He plucks each note so gently it sounds like the instrument is humming rather than singing. You've heard louder lullabies. The king takes his place on a cushioned mat. Attendants bring a bowl of water for him to rinse his hands. He dips them slowly, the way someone might touch warm bath water to test the temperature. The ripples settle quickly. A priest steps forward with a plate of dates and holds it out. The king chooses one, just one, and eats it with deliberate calm. You swear the courtyard shifts slightly when he does. Like everyone breathes out at the same time. The attendants then begin serving small portions to the priests and honored guests, placing each dish with a care that borders on tender affection. You receive a tiny bowl of grain porridge sweetened with a drizzle of date syrup. It smells comforting, earthy, warm, like breakfast made by someone who loves you but doesn't want you to stay too long. As you take your first spoonful, you notice something remarkable. Everyone eats slowly, like really slowly. The whole courtyard looks like a slow-motion advertisement for mindful eating. You decide to follow their example not because you're trying to imitate ancient nobility, but because the porridge is hot and you don't feel like burning your tongue in front of a king. Priests begin reciting soft lines, blessings of gratitude for the earth, the harvest, the animals, the ancestors, and the cooks, who, judging by the aroma, absolutely deserve it. Their voices flow gently between mouthfuls of food, never rising above the hum of the courtyard. One priest mentions the sweetness hidden inside hardship, pointing to the honeyed melon as a symbolic reminder. Another speaks of grain that wakes when watered by patience. Metaphors everywhere. It's like eating inside a poetry reading. And then, of course, comes the wonderfully odd part. An elderly attendant, smiling like he's been waiting all morning for this moment, brings out a small ceramic pot. It's wrapped in linen, warm to the touch, and clearly revered. He presents it to the king, who opens it with both hands. Inside is porridge, but not ordinary porridge. This one is studded with herbs, topped with a dollop of spiced butter, and sprinkled with what appears to be crushed nuts. A quirky tidbit rises. Some Nubian feasts involved a lucky bowl, prepared with symbolic ingredients. Whoever ate it was believed to absorb traits needed for the year ahead: strength from nuts, clarity from herbs, softness from butter. The king takes one spoonful, just one. He sets the bowl aside for others to share. The elderly attendant beams with pride. You half expect him to give you a thumbs up, but before you can admire the bowl further, a small, fluffy creature scurries across the courtyard floor. A desert hare, big ears, tiny paws. Absolutely zero awareness of royal etiquette. It darts between the tables, pauses near the king, sniffs the air, and then hops onto a low cushion. Every attendant freezes. You freeze. The hare looks around like it just realized it crashed a very important meeting. The king smiles. A soft one, barely there, but unmistakably amused. A priest whispers, "This is fortunate." A creature of the desert brings a message of resilience. Historians still argue whether animals interrupting rituals were seen as omens or simply tolerated, but the calm acceptance here suggests the Nubians preferred charming interpretations over panic. And honestly, you're here for it. The hare eventually hops off, leaving behind a tiny tuft of fur as tribute. The ritual continues with gentle offerings: a sip of beer brewed from sorghum, a bite of roasted fish, a spoonful of thick yogurt, each symbolic, each meaningful, each tiny, which your stomach is beginning to notice. Between offerings, the priests share soft reflections on community and generosity. One tells the story of a king who once paused a feast because a lost traveler arrived at the palace gates, hungry and tired. The king insisted the man be fed before the feast, continued a reminder that leadership is measured by kindness. You take another spoonful of porridge. It tastes slightly sweeter now, or maybe you're just becoming sentimental. As the ritual meal draws to a close, the king touches his hands together in a gesture of gratitude. Everyone mirrors it. The courtyard settles into a warm hush, as though the air itself is full from the offerings shared. Attendants begin clearing the plates, careful not to disrupt the soft atmosphere. The king rises, unhurried, composed, and prepares to move on. Your stomach grumbles quietly. A goat nearby grumbles louder. You pretend the goat is the one with the problem. The king walks toward the next courtyard, where another gentle ritual awaits one that draws not on taste, but on voice. You rise, steady, light, and follow. You follow the king toward a quieter wing of the palace, where the noise of the feasting courtyard fades into a gentle hush. The stone beneath your feet cools again, and the hall narrows into a long corridor lit by narrow windows, high above slits of sunlight that slice the air into soft, golden stripes. The atmosphere shifts from warm hospitality to something more introspective. Ahead, you hear it, a faint singing, not melodic in the way you expect, not like a choir or a hymn, but something older, softer, and closer to chanting. Voices weave together in low, steady tones, like waves brushing against a riverbank. You step into a courtyard unlike any you've seen so far. It is round, enclosed, and acoustically perfect. The walls curve upward in smooth stone arcs, subtly amplifying even the smallest sound. At the center stands a raised circular platform, surrounded by a ring of priests, each one with hands clasped, eyes closed, bodies swaying with slow, measured breaths. This is the chamber of echoed words. A mainstream historical fact clicks into place. Many Nubian kings participated in oral recitation rituals, where sacred stories, legal principles, victories, and ancestral teachings were spoken aloud not to inform the king but to shape him. Spoken tradition carried profound authority in Nubia, and kings were expected to absorb knowledge through listening, reflection, and quiet repetition. A priest steps forward to greet the king. His voice is soft but steady. Here, words breathe again. And breathe they do. The circle of priests begins to chant not in unison, but in gentle waves, one voice rising as another falls, creating a soundscape that vibrates through your chest. It feels less like listening to words and more like floating inside them. You don't need to understand every syllable to feel the meaning. They chant stories of earlier kings, whose patience tempered conflict, queens whose wisdom rooted the kingdom through drought, hunters who learned humility in the face of nature. The chants are rhythmic, balanced, and soothing, more like meditative storytelling than formal instruction. The king sits on the central platform. He closes his eyes. His breathing slows until you almost can't see his chest rise. The chanting deepens, softens, strengthens, loops. The priests speak truths shaped by centuries. Calm guides the strong. Stillness sharpens the mind. The king listens so the people may speak. Wisdom grows in quiet places. Your shoulders relax without you noticing. Then the ritual shifts. The chanting stops abruptly, not harshly, but like a candle being gently extinguished. One priest steps forward and holds up a slender staff carved with flowing shapes, almost like ripples in water. He taps it once on the ground. Dok. The courtyard responds with the softest echo imaginable, a whisper returning the sound as if the stones themselves want to participate. The priest begins reciting a memory, a tale of a young king who once struggled to control his temper. He describes how that king sought guidance here, listening to echoed wisdom until he learned to soothe his own storms. Historians still argue whether these tales describe real rulers or idealized parables. Some believe they were morality lessons, meant to humble kings quietly. Others think they reflect historical events compressed into symbolic form. Watching the ritual unfold, you suspect it doesn't matter. The story works either way. As the tale ends, the priest gestures for the king to rise. He does. Then something unexpected happens. The king begins to speak, not loudly, not formally, just honestly. He repeats certain phrases from the chants, but with slight variations, shaping them into reflections about his own leadership. I must listen more deeply. My strength must not outpace my patience. My words must be water, not fire. The priests nod encouragingly. You realize this isn't a performance. It's a guided moment of self-understanding. The king, engaging directly with the wisdom spoken around him, not commanding, not declaring, just reflecting. A young priest steps forward with a small ceramic bowl. Inside is a mixture of clay and water, thin enough to swirl but thick enough to mark. He dips his finger into the mixture and draws a single line across the king's forearm. This marks the path of words entering the body, he murmurs. Then he turns to you, and before you can politely decline being symbolically painted, he draws a tiny line across your wrist too. It's cool. It tingles. You suddenly feel extremely included. A quirky tidbit rises. Some Nubian rituals marked listeners with clay lines to open the skin to wisdom. Scholars interpret this metaphorically. Nobody literally believed clay made people smarter, but participants often reported feeling calmer, more grounded, or more receptive after the ritual. Mindfulness before mindfulness was cool. The king sits again. The chanting resumes, but this time the priests pause after certain lines, allowing silence to settle like soft dust before continuing. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. You find yourself leaning slightly toward the sound, as though drawn by an invisible thread. Then comes the part that nearly sends you into a nap on the spot. 4 priests pick up long, hollow reeds and blow across their tops, creating low, resonant tones. The sound vibrates through the courtyard in warm, melodic hums, like a giant flute whispering secrets. The echoes bounce from wall to wall, layering atop each other until the air feels thick with gentle resonance. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over you. It's deeply soothing, like a sound bath conducted by ancient librarians who specialize in calming stressed-out royal officials. The king rises once more. The chanting stops. The hum fades. A final priest approaches with a bowl of cool water. He dips a palm leaf into it and brushes the king's forehead, murmuring, Let your thoughts remain clear. Then he turns to you, and of course brushes your forehead too. You're now spiritually hydrated. The ritual concludes with the king placing his hands over his heart, bowing slightly to the priests. They bow lower in return. The moment hangs in the air, soft, full, and beautifully quiet. Then the king steps toward the exit. You follow, your wrist marked, your forehead cool, your mind quieter than it has been in days. Ahead lies another ritual, one shaped not by sound, but by movement, and you're ready for it. You step out of the chamber of echoed words, carrying that strange, peaceful hum inside your bones. The courtyard air feels subtly different now, cooler, but also more awake, as though the wind itself was waiting politely for the chanting to finish before continuing its rounds. The king leads you toward a wide stone stairway that curves upward, carved directly into the palace's outer wall. You glance at the sky. It's beginning to darken, not into night, into that soft, blue lavender phase, right before sunset, when shadows stretch long and everything feels patient. The king climbs the stairs unhurried, his footsteps steady and quiet. You follow, your legs slightly wobbly from the meditative trance the chanting left you in. Each step brings you higher above the palace courtyards, above the gardens, above the hum of distant kitchens preparing evening meals. By the time you reach the top, you're standing on a broad rooftop platform, surrounded by low stone railings. Braziers sit at each corner, unlit for now. A few priests already wait in silence, staring upward, and then you see it. The sky, wide, open, endless. The brilliant Nubian horizon, stretching from the dark line of distant hills to the soft shimmer of the approaching stars. This is the astronomer's terrace. A mainstream historical fact drifts into place. Nubian kings, especially during the Napatan and Meroitic periods, relied on astronomical observations to guide ritual calendars, royal ceremonies, planting seasons, and state festivals. Though less famous than Egyptian astronomy, Nubian skywatching was precise, deeply symbolic, and woven into royal responsibility. Here, the king isn't just admiring the stars, he's aligning himself with them. Priests bring out long wooden poles with notches at the ends, simple sighting instruments used to track star positions. Others carry smooth stone slabs, etched with faint lines, like giant ancient protractors. They place everything carefully around the terrace, moving with deliberate grace. One priest gestures for you to stand beside him. "You may observe," he whispers. His voice is soft enough that you wonder if he trained in the same library of whispering librarians from the previous ritual. The king approaches the terrace's center. He doesn't sit or kneel. He simply stands still, hands clasped gently before him, eyes fixed on the sky. A priest begins speaking in low tones. Light returns as light fades. Shadows lengthen as shadows are born. The sky records the story of the king. It's poetic. It's rhythmic. It's the kind of thing that would make a modern motivational speaker say, "Can I use that?" The first star appears bright, sharp, and bold. The priest beside you murmurs, "The Herald." Apparently, Nubian astronomers gave affectionate nicknames to consistent first-rise stars. A quirky tidbit floats up. Some Nubian texts suggest kings believed specific stars corresponded to virtues, patience, generosity, strength, clarity. Priests would advise which virtue the king should focus on by interpreting which star rose first on key nights. Whether this was sincere cosmology or just excellent political counseling disguised as astronomy, well, it worked. More stars blink into view. Familiar constellations take shape. Some you recognize, some drawn into patterns you've never considered. The king remains perfectly still, almost blending into the quiet silhouettes of the priests. His calm feels anchored, like he's syncing with something older than the kingdom, older than the Nile, older than memory itself. A priest lifts one of the sighting staffs and holds it horizontally. He shifts it slightly until one notch aligns with a bright star near the horizon. Another priest marks the angle on a wax tablet, using a stylus to carve careful lines. You try to look intelligent, so you nod thoughtfully. In truth, You have absolutely no idea how they're doing calculations with a stick and a block of wax. But it looks impressive. The breeze picks up, brushing softly through your hair and the linen folds of the king's cloak. A bowl of sand on the platform's edge begins to ripple with tiny swirling patterns, another measurement tool. The priests observe how the wind moves the sand, correlating it with known seasonal winds. You're starting to understand why these rituals are so calm. They require patience, observation, breathing, the kind of mindset where you let the universe talk, and you keep your mouth respectfully shut. One priest kneels and draws a circle in the sand with his finger. He marks 3 points inside it. Tonight, we honor the path of 3 fires, he whispers. You have no clue what this means, but it sounds cool. He explains softly. The path refers to a triad of stars associated with royal renewal, agricultural timing, and spiritual clarity. Kings use these celestial markers to decide when to begin purification rites, when to open the granaries, and when to prepare for desert ceremonies. Historians still argue whether these correlations were strict astronomical science or symbolic tradition developed gradually. Some scholars suggest Nubian observers were more interested in spiritual alignment than empirical measurement, while others see evidence of sophisticated calculations. Your personal conclusion? Maybe both. Humans can do math and vibes at the same time. Another star emerges, blinking softly through a streak of purple twilight. A priest raises a slender clay horn and blows a low, mellow note. The sound vibrates across the terrace, blending gently with the rising night. The king finally moves. He lifts his hand toward the sky, not to gesture dramatically like a movie monarch calling upon cosmic power, but gently, as though greeting an old friend. His fingers trace a slow line between 2 stars. A priest beside him murmurs the star names in the ancient tongue. The king repeats them quietly. This is part of the ritual, the king acknowledging the sky, and the sky acknowledging the king. You try it too. You point at a random star and greet it silently. Congratulations, you are now 0.003% astronomer. The priests begin circling the terrace, each carrying a small clay lantern. They light them one by one, placing them around the edges so the platform glows softly in a ring of warm, flickering light. The stars above shimmer more brightly in response, reflected faintly in the polished stone. The king lowers his hand. He bows his head. The priests chant a quiet closing verse. As the stars rise, so rises patience. As the sky steadies, so steadies the king. May clarity fall upon the land like gentle rain. The breeze shifts again, cooler now, scented with night and the faint aroma of distant river reeds. You breathe in deeply, feeling something settle inside your chest. The king steps away from the terrace's center. The priests extinguish the tall braziers, but leave the lanterns glowing softly around the edges. You follow the king toward the staircase once more. The night welcomes you with open, quiet arms. And below, another ritual awaits, one crafted not by stars, but by the shaping of minds. You descend the wide stone staircase with the king, leaving behind the whispering stars and the soft lantern glow of the astronomer's terrace. The air grows warmer again as you re-enter the palace interior, and the scent of incense from earlier rituals clings faintly to the corridors. Lotus, resin, and something almost like warm cedar. It's comforting, calm, familiar. The king walks with the same unhurried rhythm as before, but there's a new subtlety to his movements. His steps feel more grounded, as if the sky ritual has settled deeply into his bones. You follow him into a low-ceilinged hall supported by columns carved with looping patterns of rivers, birds, and intertwined reeds. This space feels more intimate, more cerebral. A group of scribes waits inside, kneeling behind shallow wooden desks. Each scribe holds a reed pen in one hand and a palette of ink in the other. Scrolls and clay tablets lie stacked nearby in neat bundles. The hall smells of papyrus, ink, and the kind of quiet intensity found only in rooms where people take writing way too seriously. This is the House of Royal Council, but don't let the name fool you. There will be no heated debates, no raised voices, no dramatic pointing at charts. This is Nubia, land of calm kings and rituals that whisper instead of shout. A mainstream historical fact stirs in your thoughts. Nubian kings relied heavily on scribes and counselors, who documented laws, treaties, and historical events. Records were not merely political tools, they were spiritual anchors. Writing itself was considered a sacred act, aligning order with the divine. The chief scribe steps forward, bowing deeply. He's older, with soft wrinkles around his eyes and a voice so gentle it could lull an angry hippo. He carries a scroll wrapped in linen and sealed with red wax. He kneels and offers it to the king with both hands. "This is the chronicle of gentle rule," he murmurs. "A reminder of promises made by kings before you." The king breaks the seal. Slowly, he unrolls the scroll. You catch glimpses of neat, flowing text lines of history arranged with patient care. Each section contains lessons, reflections, and warnings written in poetic form. The king reads silently for several moments. The scribes remain perfectly still. You attempt to match their stillness. You fail. Your foot itches. A young scribe gestures you closer with a shy smile. "You may look," he whispers, lifting a clay tablet covered in fresh inscriptions. You lean in. The tablet reads, "A calm voice binds where anger loosens. A patient hand builds where haste destroys. A mindful king shapes mindful days." You raise your eyebrows. Ancient Nubian leadership training was basically a self-help bestseller. The scribe grins. "We write these for the king to reflect upon. Not orders, invitations." You nod. After all the rituals you've witnessed today, it checks out. This kingdom runs on serene vibes. Another group of scribes begins preparing fresh ink by grinding pigments in shallow stone bowls. One bowl contains bright red ochre, another a deep black carbon mixture, and a third a striking green made from ground malachite. As they mix water into the powders, the colors bloom like tiny sunsets. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. Nubian scribes sometimes scented their ink with herbs or oils to help distinguish types of documents. Treaty ink might smell of cedar, festival ink of lotus, legal ink of earthy resins. Scholars debate how widely this was practiced, but at least one ancient text complains that the scribe's office smelled like a garden, so something was definitely going on. The scribes present the king with a fresh tablet, a smooth, pale clay rectangle. They place a stylus in his hand, and then the room falls into the kind of silence that feels intentional, ceremonial. The king writes, not fast, not showy, one steady stroke at a time. You can almost hear the soft scrape of stylus against clay. Each line he inscribes becomes an official part of the chronicle, a guiding thought or intention for the year ahead. You lean a little closer, reading the emerging words. Let mercy travel farther than fear. Let justice be shaped with steady breath. His handwriting is careful, balanced. Even the letter spacing looks calm. When he finishes, he hands the tablet to the chief scribe, who examines it with the solemnity of someone evaluating a priceless artifact or possibly grading a very important essay. The scribe nods approvingly. Another priest approaches, carrying a bowl of fine sand. He pours a delicate stream of sand over the wet clay to prevent smudging. The grains fall like soft rain, settling in a thin, golden layer. The king steps aside. Now it is the counselor's turn. 3 elders approach him not to challenge or interrogate, but to offer reflective questions. Their voices are low and measured, like people trying not to wake a sleeping child. Where did your heart tremble this year? Where did your patience falter? What kindness strengthened you most? What truth did you hide from yourself? These questions aren't political, they're personal, soul-level inquiries. Historians still argue whether these sessions were a form of early psychological counseling or strictly ritualized tradition, but watching the king's thoughtful, unhurried responses, you're pretty sure Nubia invented therapist energy thousands of years before therapy was cool. Each elder listens quietly. No one interrupts. No one judges. No one even clears their throat too loudly. You're beginning to wonder whether the real secret to Nubian stability was simply not stressing out their king. As the discussion ends, the scribes record short summaries on separate tablets. Nothing specific, just symbolic phrases representing lessons learned. They stack these beside the growing archive of leadership wisdom, an expanding library of gentle governance. A final ritual concludes the session. A small brazier is brought forward. The chief scribe tosses a handful of dried herbs into it: lavender, rosemary, and something that smells faintly like sweet hay. The smoke curls upward, soft and fragrant. He waves the smoke toward the king, then toward the elders, then toward you. It smells like someone is trying to relax your soul. This is for clarity, he whispers. So thought does not cling too tightly. You inhale, you exhale, you feel your brain unclench. The king bows his head in gratitude to the scribes. They bow deeper in return. As he exits the hall, the soft scratching of reed pens resumes. Ink flows, clay tablets dry. Wisdom continues. It's quiet, methodical work. You step back into the corridor behind the king, feeling lighter as though the ritual gently swept dust from your thoughts. Another ritual awaits now, one shaped not by words or stars, but by movement and rhythm, and you follow, ready for whatever calm surprise Nubia offers next. You follow the king into a quieter wing of the palace, far from the murmuring scribes and their ink-scented council hall. The corridor narrows and curves, guiding you toward a part of the complex where even the air seems to soften. Torches mounted along the walls burn with small, steady flames, none of the crackling drama you'd expect from royal illumination. These flames glow like they were told to behave politely, and they obey. The king walks ahead in silence. His steps are slow, not heavy, not ceremonial, just grounded, like someone preparing to shed a layer of thought and step into a new one. You notice small details, the way he loosens the ties of his cloak, the way his shoulders lower little by little, the way the tension that held him through earlier rituals simply dissolves. You soon reach an arched doorway draped with woven reeds. A soft breeze whistles through them, creating a low, whispery rustle like pages turning in a book you aren't fully reading. The king parts the reeds and steps through. You follow. You enter a sanctuary, unlike any other you've seen today. The ceiling opens upward, but not fully. You can glimpse the sky through carved slits, just enough for thin ribbons of sunlight or moonlight to fall across the floor. The stone beneath your feet shifts from cold tile to warm, packed earth. The scent of soil and distant rain lingers faintly, though no storm has come. You've walked into a place designed for grounding. This is the sanctuary of renewal. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Nubian kings, especially during the Kushite era, underwent periodic renewal rituals meant to reaffirm their divine legitimacy, calm their spirit, and strengthen their rule. These rituals often took place in secluded structures near temples or palace gardens, where only trusted priests and attendants could enter. Here, renewal is not a flashy spectacle. It is a retreat, a soft exhale disguised as ceremony. Two priestesses kneel by a wide clay bowl filled with water, clear, still, with lotus petals floating like tiny boats waiting for instructions. They bow deeply when the king enters. One gestures to a low bench carved from sycamore wood, polished smooth by generations of rituals. The king sits. A priest brings a small pottery jar, sealed with wax. He breaks the seal, and the scent of something sweet and earthy rises like wildflowers crushed in warm hands. He pours the mixture into the bowl of water. The lotus petals drift apart as the liquid spreads, tinting the surface with a faint gold shimmer. The priestess looks at you and smiles. You may sit as well. You sit on a mat beside the king, not too close, not too far. The mat is soft, woven from reeds that still carry a hint of river fragrance. You take a breath, and the sanctuary steals a bit of your tension effortlessly. The ritual begins. Two priestesses dip long, thin reeds into the fragrant water and flick droplets gently across the king's shoulders, arms, and chest. The droplets fall like soft rain, catching light in tiny, shimmering arcs. Each drop seems deliberate, as if they are placing calm itself onto his skin. One priestess chants softly, "Let weariness fall away. Let burdens loosen like sand. Let tomorrow meet you with steady breath." Her voice blends with the rustle of reeds and the distant coo of a dove perched somewhere on the roof. You wonder if the dove is part of the ceremony or just freeloading off the palace ambience. A quirky tidbit rises in your mind. Some records describe Nubian renewal rites involving symbolic peeling away of emotional burdens, often represented by removing a thin reed mat from around the king. Others claim kings sometimes slept in these sanctuaries to dream of ancestors who offered guidance. Historians still argue whether these dreams were ritualized, spontaneous, or exaggerated for royal propaganda. You suspect a bit of everything. Dreams tend to be multi-purpose. The king closes his eyes. His breathing slows again into that calm, nearly hypnotic rhythm you've started associating with royalty in Nubia. The priestesses begin tracing lines across his arms, with their reeds not touching him, but drawing shapes in the air. You recognize some shapes from earlier rituals: circles for completeness, waves for patience, triangles for balance. You half expect one of them to draw a coffee mug for alertness, but apparently that wasn't part of ancient iconography. Then the priestess turns to you. Your mind travels with the king today, she says softly. You must also be renewed. Before you can even protest that you are absolutely not qualified for royal-level therapy, she sprinkles a few droplets of lotus water onto your shoulders. The water is cool, refreshing, and deeply soothing. You feel something melt under your skin, maybe a muscle knot, maybe an existential dread, maybe both. A priest places a small bowl of smooth stones between you and the king. The stones are warm, sun-heated, and each one is engraved with tiny markings that look like constellations, rivers, or grains. The king selects one stone and holds it in his palm. You see it clearly, a symbol resembling flowing water. The priest whispers, "This represents release." The king exhales slowly. He places the stone into a second bowl, this one filled with soft sand. You choose a stone too. Yours has a mark that looks like a rising sun. The priest nods knowingly. "This one is for renewal," he says. You pretend you totally knew that. You place your stone into the sand next to the king's. The grainy surface muffles the tiny sound, and somehow even the act of setting something down feels symbolic here. The ritual deepens. The priestesses circle the sanctuary, scattering crushed herbs across the floor: sage, cedar leaves, and something sharp and sweet you can't identify. The fragrance surrounds you like a slow-moving cloud. The king opens his eyes again. The chief priest steps forward with a final act of renewal. He carries a narrow strip of linen dyed pale blue. He ties it loosely around the king's wrist, letting the ends hang freely. "A reminder that renewal travels with you," he whispers, "even beyond this sanctuary." Then he turns to you, because of course he does, and ties a matching strip around your wrist. You now have a growing collection of ritual accessories. At this rate, you may leave Nubia looking like the world's calmest festival attendee. The king stands. The priests bow. The sanctuary grows even quieter, as though the air itself is acknowledging the renewal. The king walks toward the doorway. He pauses for one last breath inside the sanctuary, a deep, slow inhale that seems to draw new strength into his entire being. You do the same, because imitation is free therapy. Then he steps outside. The sky is deeper now, streaked with warm pink and gold. A breeze travels across the palace grounds, carrying the sounds of distant drums, soft ones, the kind played with fingertips rather than force. The king has been renewed, and you, surprisingly, feel renewed too. And now the rituals shift again, moving into the realm where calm tradition meets the real world, where shadows lengthen and politics test even the most peaceful heart. You follow the king into that twilight. The king leads you out of the sanctuary, and for a moment, you feel like you're stepping back into the world, but it's the world seen through a different lens. The courtyard, the distant temple, the sky itself, it all seems quieter, softer, like someone just turned the volume down on a world that's always humming in the background. As the sun dips lower, the air cools, and you notice that the palace grounds are even more tranquil than before. The last rays of light stretch across the gardens, casting long shadows across the stone paths. You follow the king as he walks with the same unhurried rhythm, his movements even more fluid now, as though he's no longer merely moving through the space, but with it. You reach a small, unassuming building, tucked at the edge of the palace grounds. It's nothing like the grand, open halls you've seen before. This one is intimate, built low with curved, smooth walls that blend into the earth. The door is made of wood, etched with simple symbols you can't quite make out, and it's opened by a single attendant who gives the king a respectful bow before stepping aside. This is the Hall of Judgments, a place where the king's decision-making is as personal as it is spiritual. A mainstream historical fact flickers in your mind. Nubian kings had a reputation for personal involvement in judicial matters, often sitting in quiet chambers to resolve disputes, pass judgments, and make decisions on behalf of their people. These weren't mere legal procedures, they were part of the king's moral and spiritual obligations. Justice wasn't simply the application of laws, it was the manifestation of royal virtue. Inside, the room is small, but not cramped. A large stone table sits in the center, and around it are several cushions and low benches, each placed with deliberate care. The walls are decorated with subtle carvings, abstract symbols of balance, scales, and the steady hand of judgment. On one wall, a single phrase is carved in soft stone: "Wisdom guides the hand, and the hand gives weight to the heart." You can't help but admire the simplicity of it. The king sits on one of the cushions at the table. His posture remains calm, as though he's still carrying the serenity of the previous rituals within him. You take a seat beside him, wondering just how much more relaxed you can get without actually turning into a puddle. Two attendants enter, one carrying a bundle of scrolls, the other a small bowl of stones. The scrolls are handed to the king, and he unrolls the first one, scanning it quietly, his eyes moving slowly across the text. The scroll contains petitions, requests for judgment on matters of land, trade, family, and even disputes over personal goods. There's nothing particularly exciting about these scrolls, nothing that would make you want to sit up straighter, but watching the king's steady attention, you realize the gravity of each tiny decision. Each petition, no matter how small, is a thread in the fabric of his rule. The king reads the first petition silently, and then nods. He picks up one of the small stones, smooth and cool, and places it into a shallow bowl in front of him. The attendants note the gesture with respectful silence. The king's gesture is simple, but the symbolism is clear. He acknowledges the request, and with that stone, he affirms the commitment to weigh it carefully. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Historians often debate whether this practice of using stones was purely symbolic, or if it had a more practical purpose. Some suggest the stones represented a measure of time spent contemplating each decision. Others believe it was simply a ritual to keep the king focused, a tactile way to remind him that even in a world of abstract choices, every action still carried weight. It's hard to say for sure, but watching the king's slow, deliberate movements, you suspect it might be both. The scroll is set aside, and another one is brought forward. This one is different. It contains a request for judgment on a family dispute, one involving land ownership. You can tell immediately that this matter is more delicate. The king's expression softens, his brow furrowing ever so slightly. He reads it more slowly this time, pausing after each line, as if weighing the words in his mind. As the king contemplates, the attendants quietly prepare the stones. One by one, they add them to the bowl, their sound barely audible in the quiet room. The king reaches for another stone, placing it into the bowl with the others. There is no dramatic speech, no loud proclamations, just a moment of silent understanding as the king moves through the motions of judgment, one stone at a time. Finally, after what feels like a small eternity, the king speaks, his voice low but clear. The matter shall be resolved through peace. The land will be shared. The attendants nod, and the scroll is rolled up again. The judgment is complete. You sit quietly, letting the weight of the moment settle in. There's something incredibly peaceful about the way the king handles these matters. Nothing rushed, no shouting, just calm, steady decision-making. The king turns to you, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "This is the weight of leadership," he says, almost as if speaking to himself. The balance between what is seen and what is unseen, between what is spoken and what is silent. You nod, understanding the depth of what he means. These rituals aren't just about the decisions themselves, they're about the process, the slow, deliberate unfolding of each choice, one stone at a time. The king's role isn't to rush through decisions, but to take each one in stride, to find balance not only in the outcome, but in the act of choosing itself. As the ritual ends, the attendants begin clearing the scrolls and stones. The king stands, stretching slightly, his movements still as graceful as ever. You follow him out of the hall, feeling a sense of calm settle over you. The rest of the palace feels distant now. The grand chambers, the vast gardens, even the rituals of the sky, they all seem far away, as if the world itself is resting, breathing quietly with the king's every step. And yet, you know the day isn't over. Another ritual waits. But for now, as you walk beside the king, you realize something remarkable. You feel lighter than when you first entered the palace, not because of anything grand, but because the king has taught you, in his own quiet way, how to pause, how to listen, how to find peace, not in the world around you, but in the stillness within. You walk with the king toward the final ritual of the day. The evening light has deepened into twilight, and the atmosphere around the palace is imbued with a deep serenity, like the entire palace itself is exhaling after a day full of quiet rituals. The last whispers of the sun reflect off the stone walls in soft, golden hues, casting elongated shadows across the path. The night air, cool and crisp, carries with it a sense of finality, almost as if the day's events were shaping the world into a calm pause before the next. The king's pace has slowed, his steps even more measured now. You notice the change, the subtle shift in his demeanor. He's not just walking through the palace anymore, he's walking through a space that is more than just physical. He's walking through his own rule, his decisions, his responsibilities, and now, finally, his rest. Ahead of you lies a small courtyard, a quiet garden bordered by high stone walls. The path is lined with low shrubs and neatly trimmed hedges. The scent of evening flowers, jasmine and myrrh, lingers in the air, faint and soothing, wrapping around you like a soft blanket. A few attendants stand at the edges, keeping a respectful distance, and the courtyard is empty except for a small altar at its center. This, you realize, is the final ritual, the ritual of rest. A mainstream historical fact filters through your mind. In Nubia, the end of the day's royal rituals was often marked by a simple yet profound act of quiet prayer and reflection. Kings, after enduring a day filled with public responsibility, would retreat to spaces like this one for personal time, time to breathe, to clear the mind, and to ensure that their own inner peace mirrored the calm they had projected all day. The king moves toward the altar. It's small, unobtrusive, made of simple stone and wood. On it rests a single, unadorned bowl filled with water clear and still, its surface undisturbed. A small offering of fresh fruit sits nearby, along with a thin strip of linen, subtly embroidered with symbols of the sun and the moon. The king kneels in front of the altar, his movements deliberate and graceful. His eyes are closed, his hands resting gently on his knees, and for a moment, you realize you can hear nothing but the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The stillness around you deepens. A priest approaches the king with a small bowl of oil, the rich scent of it filling the air. The priest dips his fingers into the oil, then gently places a drop on the king's forehead, a simple gesture that symbolizes the final cleansing of the day. The king bows his head slightly as the oil cools on his skin, and you sense that this moment is not about cleansing the body, but the spirit. The priest steps back, and the king is left alone in the peace of the moment. His breathing is slow, steady, and for the first time all day, there is no expectation, no weight on his shoulders. There is only the quiet sound of the breeze and the subtle rustling of the trees. The world seems to hold its breath with him. Historians still argue whether these final moments were part of a larger, grand ceremony, or if they were more personal, a private reflection after the rigors of royal duty. Some suggest it was simply a way for the king to reset, to give himself a moment of peace before the next day's responsibilities. Others believe it was a divine act, a quiet communion between the ruler and the gods. After all, the king was not just a leader but the physical embodiment of divine will. As you stand there, feeling the weight of the stillness, you begin to realize that these rituals weren't just about guiding a kingdom, they were about guiding a man. The king wasn't simply leading his people, he was also learning to lead himself. The king rises from the altar, his movements slow but sure, and turns to face you. There's no grand speech, no applause from unseen crowds, just a quiet acknowledgement. He gestures toward the offering bowl, inviting you to step forward. You hesitate for a moment. Then, With a sense of quiet understanding, you approach. You take a piece of fruit from the bowl, a simple, ripe fig. You feel the soft skin of it beneath your fingers. The offering isn't grand or ceremonial, but somehow it feels as if it carries everything the day has held. The calm, the reflection, the steady rhythm of all the rituals you've witnessed. You raise the fruit to your lips and take a slow, deliberate bite. The sweetness is simple, pure, and as you savor the taste, you realize that in a way, it encapsulates everything you've experienced. The slow, steady unfolding of a king's day, the quiet rituals that guide his spirit, and the deep calm that now fills the space between you both. The king nods. It's not a dismissal, not a command. It's a gesture of mutual understanding. In this space, in this moment, there is no need for words. As you take another moment to breathe, you realize that this final ritual is not about closure, no. It's about continuity. The king will rise again tomorrow, as will you. The rituals will continue, each day flowing into the next. But for now, there is peace, there is rest. And as the king turns to leave the courtyard, you follow him once again, carrying with you the quiet weight of the day's journey. You walk in the soft twilight, knowing that the journey has no end, not for the king, and not for you. It's simply a continual dance of calm and chaos, light and shadow, stillness and motion. And as you walk beside the king, you realize that even in the most royal of spaces, the most powerful rituals are often the softest,